This we beg in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Please be seated. Item number 2, the confirmation of minutes. Vice President John White, you have the floor.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, 26th March 2025 be taken as read.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of Wednesday, 26th March 2025 be confirmed.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The minutes are confirmed. Thank you, Vice President John White. Item number 3, messages. Mrs. Beal.
There are no messages, Madam President.
Thank you, Mrs. Beal. Item number 4, reports of committees. There are none. Item number 5, announcements. We have a few announcements this morning, Senators. The first is in the name of Senator the Honorable Kim Wilkerson, government leader in the Senate, and the Attorney General. You have the floor, Madam AG.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, listening audience. Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the Information Commissioner's 2024 Annual Report as required by Section 58(1) of the Public Access to Information PATI Act 2010. Senators may access copies of the report on their tablets and or on the Parliament website.
Thank you. And I believe you have a second announcement. Please proceed when you're ready.
Yeah. The second one announcement appears to. The second one, Madam President, I hereby present for the information of the Senate, the Office of the Information Commissioner audited financial statements for the year ended March 31, 2023. And the fiscal year ending 31st March 2024. Senators may access copies of the statements on their tablets and or the Parliament website.
Thank you, and I believe you have a third one. I beg your pardon.
Yes, I covered
Sorry.
them both.
I beg your pardon. You covered them both. And the fourth one is in the name of Senator Lindsay Simmons.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the Financial Assistance Amendment Regulations 2024 as made by the Minister responsible for financial assistance in exercise of the power conferred by Section 21 of the Financial Assistance Act 2001. Senators may access copies of the regulation on their tablet or on the parliamentary website. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons. Item number 6, notices of motion. We do have a motion that is to be delivered by the Honorable Minister Caesar, spokesperson for finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Good
Mrs.
morning.
Good morning.
And good morning to the listening audience. Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 71-2 be suspended. Okay. Apologies. I was reading the second one.
No problem.
All right. Good morning, Madam President. I hereby present for the following resolution and give notice that I propose to move the following resolution at a later point in the meeting. Whereas it is provided by Section 3 of the Ministers and Members of the Legislature Salaries and Pensions Act 1975, the Principal Act, that Schedule 2 to the Principal Act may be amended from time to time by resolution passed by both the Senate and the House of Assembly. And whereas it is expedient that Schedule 2 to the Principal Act be now amended. Be it resolved that the Honorable House of Assembly and the Senate, pursuant to the provisions of Section 3 of the Ministers and Members of Legislature Salaries and Pensions Act 1975, hereby amend Schedule 2 to the said act by 1. Inserting immediately below Office of Premier the offices of Deputy Premier, Attorney General, and Minister of Finance, and 2. Deleting the office of Parliamentary Secretaries and substituting the office of Junior Ministers. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister Caesar. Item number 7, petitions. There are none. Item number 8, statements. Senators, we have 5 statements this morning. The first one is in the name of Senator the Honorable Crystal Caesar. Minister Caesar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise today to share with my Senate colleagues and the audience listening that the application period for the Ministry of Education scholarships and awards is currently underway and will close on Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. Madam President, the Ministry of Education provides scholarships and awards to Bermudian students who want to pursue higher education each year. The government of Bermuda firmly believes that post-secondary education funding should be allocated strategically and in alignment with our core values. The awards and scholarship categories offer financial assistance to the aspiring student, a mature learner, or a dedicated teacher pursuing professional training. Madam President, I am pleased to share that since 2017, the government has successfully increased the budget for our scholarships and awards. Last year, 67 Bermudian students received awards and scholarships. We anticipate an increase in the number of recipients this year. In the budget year 2024-25, just under $2 million was allocated to assist our students seeking tertiary or vocational further education. Madam President, I would like to highlight that an additional $50,000 was also provided to assist 5 students who were facing financial barriers with continuing their post-secondary education overseas. The additional funding was provided from the mid-year review. Madam President, the Ministry of Education is pleased to offer financial support through 10 scholarship categories to help students to achieve their educational goals. The 2025 Ministry of Education scholarships and awards are as follows. The Minister's Achievement Scholarship, which helps high-achieving Cedar Bridge Academy and the Barclay Institute graduate students attend overseas post-secondary education. The funding for this award is $25,000 per year. Next, the Minister's Exceptional Student Award for graduating students or school leavers with disabilities for local or overseas post-secondary study. Persons with disabilities up to the age of 25 who may be working, volunteering, or already attending college or university are eligible to apply. The funding for this award is $25,000 per year for overseas study and $5,000 for local study. The Minister's Technical and Vocational Award is for public school graduates for local or overseas post-secondary study. The funding for this award is $25,000 per year for overseas study and $7,500 for local study. Next, the Minister's Applied Science Scholarship for graduating public senior school students who attended the Applied Technology Dual Enrollment Diploma Program with Bermuda College and who plan to continue the program to obtain an associate's degree or certificate. The funding for this award is $5,000 for 1 year. The Further Education Award. This is for current students who have completed at least 1 year at an accredited college or university for continued post-secondary study. Awards will be also given to students pursuing or attending postgraduate study. The funding for this award is $10,000 for 1 year. The Non-Traditional Student Award is for persons aged 25 and over pursuing their first post-secondary degree. The funding for this award is $25,000 per year. The Teacher Education Scholarship is for current college or university students studying a selected number of subjects and/or areas of teaching needed in the Bermuda public school system. Applicants must graduate, complete teaching, practicum, and obtain a BEC license within 3 years of receiving this award, and the award amount for this is $20,000 per year. The Bermuda Government Scholarship for Well-Rounded Graduating College, or university students up to the age of 25 who demonstrate outstanding academic achievement. The funding for this award is $35,000 per year. There's the University of West Indies Scholarship as well, which provides funding for up to 3 years for either undergraduate or postgraduate students, and the funding for this award is $7,500 per year. The Bermuda College Book Award provides funding for books for Bermuda College students in financial need, and the funding for this award is $500 per year. Madam President, in addition to the scholarships we offer, the College Promise provides public high school graduates with a GPA of 3.0 or higher the opportunity to attend Bermuda College tuition-free. This opportunity allows students to obtain their associate's degree while also gaining credits that can be used towards continuing their post-secondary education at an overseas institution. Madam President, the Scholarships and Awards Program Manager, Ms. Shanae Smith, has been actively engaged in outreach with students to ensure that they are well informed about our scholarship offerings this year. The ministry has participated in webinars, in-person information sessions at senior schools, and panel discussions with students and parents invited to attend. This year, we also launched an animated promotional video created by a Bermudian artist, Tashelle Bean, which I think we've all seen and quite enjoy, and that is to raise awareness of our scholarship offerings on social media in our target market. Madam President, this government remains unwavering in our commitment to build a fairer, more just, and more stable Bermuda for our students and adults wishing to pursue further education and certification. In closing, Madam President, much effort has gone into raising public awareness about the ministry's scholarships and awards, and we hope that as many students as possible will submit complete applications before the deadline. We hope parents, guardians, relatives, and my Senate colleagues will also support students to ensure that they can apply before the April 15th deadline. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Minister Caesar, Minister of Education. Senators, before I proceed with the next statement, I'd just like to acknowledge and welcome Mr. Vernon Weirs from the National Security to our chamber. Welcome to you, sir. Second statement is in the name of Senator Lindsay Simmons, Junior Minister of National Security. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I take this opportunity today to provide an update on the progress of the island's closed circuit television CCTV network upgrade and the implementation of the Speed Camera Initiative. Madam President, Senators may recall that in 2023, Digicel Bermuda was awarded the contract to upgrade the CCTV networks and provide a managed maintenance service plan. The total contract value is $4,047,440, comprising an equipment and installation cost of $1,035,500 and a 5-year managed maintenance service plan valued at $602,388 annually, totaling $3,011,940. Madam President, one of the key enhancements of the CCTV network is its deployment on the new fiber network. This modernization requires civil, road, and electrical works that were not included in the original request for proposal, the RFP, since vendors could not accurately quantify these costs in advance. As a result, the current cost of all civil and electrical works associated with the project stands at $463,651. Madam President, the Ministry's CCTV implementation team has made every effort to minimize costs by collaborating with the Corporation of Hamilton, the Ministry of Public Works, Works and Engineering Unit, and Balco to utilize existing power sources. While some cost-saving measures were successful, others proved unfeasible. Madam President, the upgraded systems included 258 cameras featuring 4 types, 19 license plate recognitions, LPR cameras, 103 plain tilt zoom PTZ cameras, 74 multi-sensory cameras, and 62 varifocal cameras. Notably, a single multi-sensory camera integrates 4 fully functioned cameras covering a wider area while maintaining clarity. Madam President, real-time monitoring has significantly enhanced the Bermuda Police Service BPS ability to access incidents as they unfold, enabling quicker deployment of resources during emergencies. This capability has already proven crucial in improving response times and overall public safety. Madam President, as of today, 219 cameras have been installed, with 204 currently online across 129 site locations, providing 454 distinct camera views. The project commenced in September 2023, but encountered unforeseen challenges that have affected the completion timeline. Despite these setbacks, the overall project is now 90% complete, encompassing camera installation, software integration, and training, barring any major weather delays or unforeseen events. The project is expected to be completed by July 2025. Madam President, an additional 34 camera site locations are being prepared for the final phase of civil and electrical works. The expansion will increase the total number of CCTV locations from 130 to 150 across the island. We consider this to be an enormous achievement in terms of coverage across the island. Madam President, beyond physical installation, this project involves critical components such as network infrastructure, power integration, and seamless connectivity to central command centers to ensure that systems operate at peak effectiveness. Moreover, multiple government departments and external agencies have played a vital role on these initiatives, including the Ministry of National Security Headquarters, PPS, the Ministry of Public Works and Engineering Unit, the Department of Estates and Highways, the Department of Planning, and the Information Technology Department, along with external partners such as Balco and the corporations of St. George's and Hamilton. Madam President, while progress has been made, delays have inevitably impacted the next phase of the CCTV upgrade, the introduction of speed cameras. However, initial testings of the LPR cameras have begun and will continue over the next few months. I recently had the opportunity to review preliminary findings and see the demonstration of the LPR cameras, and I was very impressed with how the system has advanced. This is a wonderful progress, and I look forward to further developments in this area over the next year. Based on initial research and testing, additional LPR cameras and site locations will be required to optimize the speed cameras initiatives. A comprehensive plan is currently being developed to expand this initiative. Madam President, in the coming months, the Ministry of National Security and the BPS will work closely with the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Justice on legislative amendments necessary for implementing the ticketing system for speed cameras. This will be the final step in the implementation of the system that we are confident will improve the safety of our roads. Madam President, it is important to note that the upgrades of the CCTV system has been designed with privacy protection in mind. The system aligns with both current privacy regulations and future requirements, ensuring the privacy controls are adequately addressed. The request for proposal specifically requires vendors to incorporate privacy safeguards in both the camera's features and the video management system, VMS. Madam President, residents have expressed a greater sense of security knowing that CCTV coverage has been enhanced. This has increased confidence, has encouraged more community engagement, with citizens more willing to report suspicious activities to the BPS. Madam President, we have even received requests from community clubs and neighborhoods to further expand the CCTV coverage. Madam President, to further address privacy concerns, the ministry and the BPS has engaged in petty and PIPA units and the Privacy Commission's office to discuss in discussions of collaboration, transparency, and public communications regarding CCTV privacy matters. Madam President, as we approach the completion of this initiative, the Ministry, in partnership with the BPS and the Privacy Commissioner Office, will host a town hall to educate the public on privacy considerations and best practice related to CCTV cameras. Also, this town hall will address any privacy concerns that the public may have. Madam President, I am pleased to report that the Ministry of National Security and the BPS have worked diligently with internal and external stakeholders to implement this critical project. Madam President, I extend my gratitude to the multiple teams who have contributed to the successful execution of the CCTV initiatives thus far. Madam President, we are delivering on our promise to upgrade the island CCTV network and introduce a modern speed control regime on our roads. As I have stated before, this government remains committed to enhancing public safety, and this initiative is a testament of our mission at the Ministry of National Security, working together to keep you safe. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsey Simmons, Junior Minister for National Security. I believe you have a second statement, and before you give that, may I also acknowledge and welcome Mr. Dana Lovell, the Chief Fire Officer. Welcome to the Senate, sir. You can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to provide senators with an update on a key strategic initiative of the Ministry of National Security stemming from the 2022 speech from the throne. Madam President, honorable members may recall that the speech the government pledged to invite His Majesty's Inspectorate of the Constabulary and the Fire and Rescue Service to conduct a review of the Bermuda Fire Service and Rescue Services, BFRS. Specifically, it was stated the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service serves as Bermuda's first responders, providing island-wide EMT expertise, firefighting capability, and specialist operations in support of critical infrastructure. To ensure the highest standards of fitness for the role, His Majesty's Inspectorate of the Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services will be invited to conduct a review of the service, the first since 2010. Upon completion, the legislator will be invited to take note of the review and its recommendations. Madam President, following the announcement in 2022, the Chief Fire Officer engaged in the Inspectorate in discussions about such a review. From these exchanges, it was recommended that the government would derive added value and peer-led review by the National Fire Chiefs Council, NFCC, as a precursor to the formal review by His Majesty's Incorporated of the Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Service. The Ministry of National Security concurred with this recommendation and directed the Chief Fire Officer to engage the NFCC to undertake the peer-led review of the earliest opportunity. Madam President, the Ministry of National Security further decided that it would be prudent to conduct an internal review of the BFRS in preparation of the NFCC's visit in early 2025. Consequently, the Chief Fire Officer commissioned Management Consulary Services to conduct an internal organization and staffing review of the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service in November 2023. The findings of this internal review has been instrumental in assessing staffing levels and operational efficiencies of the BFRS. The Ministry of National Security greatly benefited from these insights in determining the BFRS's resources needed. The MCS report was subsequently submitted as part of the discovery phase of the NFCC review and will be referenced in the NFCC's findings. Madam President, to give some breakdown of the context, the NFCC serves as the professional voice of the United Kingdom's Fire and Rescue Service. with a mandate to improve the developed fire and rescue services across the United Kingdom. The NFCC's core objectives include strengthening professionalism and operational leadership of the fire and rescue service, enhancing national coordination, reducing duplications and increasing efficiencies, supporting local service delivery, and providing a greater influence for the fire and rescue authorities and their services. Madam President, I am pleased to report that in February of this year, the BFRS underwent a comprehensive organizational review conducted by 4 members NFCC UK team led by Chief Fire Officer Neil O'Dean, Chair of the NFCC's Prevention Committee. Their report, which was received this week and is currently being reviewed, is intended to support the BFRS in planning and prioritizing its resources to address evolving risks through 2030. The scope of the NFCC review included, but was not limited to, an assessment of the current organization structure, staffing levels, and shift patterns, the impact of the newly negotiated firefighter benefit packages under the collective bargaining agreement, training requirements, and technological and equipment needs. Madam President, the review team worked under certain constraints due to the timing of their visit coinciding with Bermuda's general election. They refrained from engaging with elected members of Parliament to maintain impartiality and to avoid the risk of perceived political influence. Their evaluations drew on comparisons with the UK standards and best practice while remaining sensitive to Bermuda's unique context as an island country. Madam President, it is anticipated that a review by His Majesty's Incorporated of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, which will be conducted later this year or early 2026, will build upon the foundational work undertaken by the Ministry of National Security and the BFRS. This forthcoming final review will undoubtedly provide additional findings and recommendations to support continuous improvement. Madam President, the ultimate objective of this phase review process is to modernize the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service in order to ensure that it remains effective, efficient, and fully capable of meeting the needs of the Bermuda public. Madam President, the Ministry of National Security remains steadfast in its commitment to support the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service. We will continue to provide the support necessary resources to ensure that our fire and rescue service remains modern, efficient, and fit for purpose, and are well equipped to protect the people and save lives. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons. And I believe you have another statement on the recent violence in our community. You can continue when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, there are videos that were circulating in Bermuda showing students from our schools, particularly Cedar Bridge, and including middle school students, engaging in violent and disturbing conduct towards each other. This government is not taking this lightly. Madam President, the Ministry of National Security contacted me in my capacity as Cedar Bridge Academy's chairperson to discuss this matter. As the chairperson of Cedar Bridge Academy, I was already in communications with Principal Kenneth Caesar, Minister of Education, Senator Crystal Caesar, MP Leroy Bean, and the Bermuda Police Service. Immediate action is being taken to address this specific situation and prevent further incidents. Madam President, we also witnessed an act of bravery and responsible citizenship from Deputy Principal Christopher Swan, who risked his life to tackle a young man armed with a knife. His quick response likely prevented serious harm, and we commend him for his courage and dedication to protecting others. However, this should never have happened in the first place. No student, teacher, or staff member should have to face this level of violence in a school environment or around Bermuda. Madam President, this antisocial behavior among our youth is deeply concerning. We cannot afford to lose any more of our children to violence, crime, and negative influence. Every life lost, every young person caught up in the justice system, and every act of a youth violence is a failure of society. This is not just a school issue, it is a community matter, and we must work together to remedy this problem. Madam President, this government remains committed to curbing antisocial behavior and ensuring the safety of our youth. We recognize that this is not just a disciplinary issue, but a deeper societal issue that requires a unified, multifaceted approach throughout our country. Madam President, we are also asking the public to stop forwarding videos of violent incidents involving our youth. Sharing these videos only amplifies the trauma, fuels negativity, and encourages further antisocial behavior. Instead, if someone receives such content, we urge them to report it immediately to Bermuda Police Service so that the proper authorities can handle the matter. Our focus should be protecting our children, not spreading outrageous content that could further harm them. Madam President, we all must recognize that we are the village. We are the role models that our children need to see. They are watching us, learning from our actions, and looking for our guidance. If we want them to make positive choices, we must show them what that looks like. Madam President, we must also demand that the parents of these children take responsibility for their behavior. These children are clearly recognizable in these videos, so it is right for us to expect the adults in their lives to take accountability for these unacceptable and egregious behaviors. Adults must play their role in training up our children and not tolerate this violent behavior. Government cannot solve this problem without the proper intervention of parents and adults. Madam President, our violence reduction strategy is a comprehensive action plan that contains a multitude of proactive and preventative measures to address violence in our community. Our gang reduction team is heavily involved in delivering programs and providing interventions that are helping to address the issue of our youth violence. Madam President, as part of the violence reduction strategy that was released by the Minister of National Security last November, here are some of the programs that we know are solutions for the way forward. Number 1, stronger security and prevention measures. We shall continue the collaboration between the Bermuda Police Service and the schools to ensure proactive measures are in place to detect and deter dangerous activities. Enforcing a zero-tolerance policy for weapons in schools with a clear, distinctive consequence. Number 2, mental health and crisis interventions. Expanding access to counselors to support our young people before they reach a crisis point. B, identifying at-risk youth early and providing intervention programs that address trauma, behavioral issues, and emotional distress. C, strengthening partnership with mental health organizations to ensure that youth have access to help they need. Number 3, parent and community engagement. Through the violent reduction strategy, we are A, launching education opportunities and awareness programs to equip parents with the tools to recognize warning signs of gang involvement, bullying, and emotional struggles in their children. B, strengthening connections between schools, churches, community leaders, sports clubs, and local organizations to provide mentorship and guidance. C, encouraging parents to take an active role in their children's lives, monitoring their activities, setting boundaries, and fostering an open communications. 4, empowering youth with positive alternatives. A, expanding community programs and job training programs to give young people constructive outlooks for their energy and creativity. B, partnering with businesses and professionals to create mentorship programs that expose youth to career opportunities and positive role models. C, increase funding for youth-focused initiatives that promote leadership, discipline, and self-respect. 5, conflict resolution and restorative justice. A, continuing mediation programs and conflict resolution training to help our youth learn how to handle disputes peacefully. B, continuing a restorative justice approach where youth are held accountable for their actions but are also given the opportunity to reform and grow. Madam President, Bermuda must work together in this arena. The future of our children is at stake. We cannot allow violence, peer pressure, and negative influence to steal their potential. Madam President, we have some time now. We have Madam President, we have for some time now been advocating for a collective approach to the youth violence in our community. We are asking the entire community to look out for our children. If you see something, say something. If you know a young person who is struggling or heading on the wrong path, reach out and provide some guidance, advice, or help. If you can be a mentor, a supporter, a protector, now is the time to step up and make a positive difference in someone's life. Madam President, it takes all of us, parents, teachers, neighbors, faith leaders, law enforcement, and the wider community to ensure that our children grow up in a safe, supportive, and nurturing environment. This is not just about laws and policies, it's about our collective responsibility to protect and guard the next generation. We must hold each other accountable for the contributions we are making towards a safer and more secure future for our children. Madam President, this government stands firm in its commitment to doing our
Doing our best, is it?
doing our part in protecting our children. We will continue working with educators, parents, law enforcement, and the community to create a safer and brighter future for Bermuda's youth. Madam President, I hasten to reiterate that this is not a political matter. This matter is far beyond the cut and the thrust of policies. This is a matter that demands our collective cooperation and mutual support, irrespective of political affiliations. Our youth deserve our collective efforts towards providing them with guidance, discipline, structure, and the support they need to become productive and responsible citizens in this community. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons, Junior Minister of National Security. The final statement, Dementia Care Services Pilot Program Update, and that's Senator Fablet. I think you will be presenting this statement.
Yes, thank you, Madam
Start
President.
when you're ready.
Sure thing. Good morning to the listening public and my colleagues here in the Senate. Madam President, this morning I rise to share with my Senate colleagues observations, findings, and data stemming from the operation of the Dementia Care Services Pilot Program, which was first launched by the Ministry of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors in October 2023 through its Office of Aging and Disability Services. The purpose of this program is to ensure those persons living with dementia who are uninsured or underinsured have access to dementia navigation and support services. Madam President, as a backdrop, dementia is an umbrella term for degenerative diseases that impact the brain. This results in memory loss and changes to one's behavior and one's thinking, which impacts our ability to perform everyday activities. According to the World Health Organization, global numbers for dementia are expected to triple by 2050 due to aging populations and chronic diseases that are risk factors for this disease. It is estimated that up to 45% of dementia cases could be reduced through addressing modifiable risk factors for dementia. Prevention is always preferable. However, for people already with the disease, we must support not only them, but also their carers through its challenging progression. Madam President, in Bermuda, based on current processes, there are over 3,600 patients inputted into the Bermuda Hospital Board system as having dementia. Work continues to better define prevalence data and the potential future impact on the Bermuda system. However, to date, as dementia is a progressive disease, people's needs for care and support increase, placing greater demand on our long-term care services and supports over time. A lack of knowledge of the disease and support for those caring for persons with dementia can result in unnecessary and costly hospital admissions or care home placement. It also increases the risk for abuse and neglect, as cognitive impairment is a significant risk factor for such. Madam President, it is within this context that the government is committed to addressing the social, clinical, and economic challenges of dementia. As such, the Ministry of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors has undertaken the following related initiatives. In 2022, provided several education series on dementia. In October 2023, introduced the Dementia Navigation and Care Pilot Program. In June 2024, extended the pilot program based on the data obtained. In November 2024, developed a detailed project inception plan for the design of a seniors daycare facility with a dementia care focus. In December 2024, completed the first national senior strategy for Bermuda, inclusive of a focus on dementia. January 2025, contracted the expertise of the Bermuda Health Council to commence developing an integrated care pathway for dementia, and in February 2025, engaged in meetings to start assessing the designated site for the dementia-focused senior care daycare facility. Madam President, of these initiatives, it is the pilot program I will provide an update on this morning. In November 2023, North Star Dementia Limited was contracted to provide a 6-month pilot program for dementia navigation and support services for persons experiencing dementia who were either underinsured or uninsured. These services included comprehensive dementia assessments, personalized care planning, cognitive compensatory strategies, case management, caregiver education and support, crisis intervention, and prevention. This program was developed based on evidence-based research that recognizes the vital importance and role of dementia care management to not only improve quality of life for persons with dementia, but also their carers, which in turn decreases more costly care caused by hospitalization or crisis management. North Star Dementia was selected not only because they specialized in this area, but also because their service model supplements the pilot program to expand its reach and depth of support. Madam President, between October 2023 and December 2024, the ministry provided a total of $96,000 to fund the pilot program, which contributed to serving 111 persons with dementia, of which 58%, or roughly 63 clients, were female. 55%, or 61 clients, were between 75 and 84 years of age. 67%, or 74 clients, were Black Bermudian. For the caregivers who were clients and received services, 56 were the adult children of the client, 70% were female caregivers. There was a total of 260 client contacts during this period. The intensity and type of contact was tailored to the needs of the family and the stage of the dementia progression. Madam President, the question is, what have we learned to date about the need for a dementia care services program based on client feedback and data findings? The answer is 3 key observations. 1. There is a funding gap for dementia navigation and support services. 2. Persons are not getting formally diagnosed. And 3. Caregivers are stressed and not getting enough support. Madam President, let me briefly speak to each of these 3 observations. Number 1, there's a funding gap for dementia navigation and support services. Nearly 95% of the clients in the pilot program were insured. However, 84% of all referrals could not contribute to the full cost, inclusive of copay of the services. Number 2, persons are not getting formally diagnosed. At the start of the program, 46% of clients stated they did not have a formal diagnosis. However, after participating in the pilot program, 77% had obtained a diagnosis. 3. Carers are stressed and not getting enough support. At the start of the pilot program, 16% of the caregivers rated their stress level as severe, and 52% said theirs was moderate. At the 12-month evaluation mark for those clients evaluated, 46% felt somewhat less stressed, 27% were significantly less stressed, 62% felt much more knowledgeable about dementia, 77% were more confident in implementing care strategies for their loved one, and 73% were more aware of local resources available. Madam President, the pilot program highlighted to its clients the importance of being diagnosed to determine if one is experiencing dementia or not. This allows persons to prepare ahead and put their affairs in order, determine what supports will be needed, and get critical legal documents and financial resources in place. After starting the pilot, 65% of the clients obtained a power of attorney, and 46% obtained an advance directive. Madam President, the pilot program outlined how persons can start interventions and finding supports sooner rather than later. For example, there are available medications or programs that help decrease the impact of the cognitive decline early in dementia progression. Additionally, there are non-medical interventions to help manage behaviors or concerns that can reduce the need for costly hospitalization admission. Roughly 81% of the clients in the pilot program had no hospital admission, and 46% had an increase in social support for their loved one. Madam President, it is important that family carers have the support they need to continue the care of their loved ones. Access to support groups, respite, daycare, activity programs, and care home placement is needed. The pilot program demonstrated the critical role of system navigation and care management for family carers and persons living with dementia to provide support and guidance with direct care and available support services. This is evident by 100% of clients evaluated stating the Dementia Care Services pilot program should continue. Madam President, the pilot findings are only from a small sample of persons diagnosed with dementia. This is why the Ministry's systemic work in collaboration with the Ministry of Health is critical for long-term solutions. Under the framework of the National Seniors Strategy, the Ministry of Youth, Social Development and Seniors contracted the Bermuda Health Council to develop an integrated care pathway for dementia. In collaboration and alignment with the Ministry of Health's health system reform work and the Health Council's Dementia Health Needs Assessment. This initiative is mapping current patient journeys and identifying system and service gaps and needs. A preferred care pathway will be established in consultation with stakeholders, and an action plan will be developed. This pathway will cover prevention to end of life, as the entire spectrum must be addressed to not only reduce the prevalence of dementia in Bermuda, but also its negative impact on those living with the disease, their support persons, and the sustainability of our health and long-term care systems. Fundamental to this work is establishing a standardized formal diagnosis process to ensure we obtain the most accurate data as possible on dementia and its varying types. Madam President, in closing, we acknowledge and thank all those persons living with dementia, their carers, and the service providers who have shared and continue to share their experiences, knowledge, expertise, and very limited time as part of this pilot program work for improving Bermuda's dementia care system for current and future generations. We look forward to updating the Senate and the community on the continuing progress of these initiatives. During the interim, we encourage our community to increase their awareness of dementia prevention and how to lend support to persons and carers, as well as the organizations in place that support persons living with dementia and their families. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Fubler. Moving on with our agenda. Item number 9, introduction of bills. There are none. Item number 10, the first reading of public bills. The following public bills have been received from the Honorable House of Assembly and are now read for the first time. Their titles are respectively, the Corporate Income Tax Penalty Provisions Amendment Act 2025, Municipalities Amendment Act 2025, and Employment Amendment Act 2025. Item number 11, the first reading of private bills. There are none. Item number 12, question period. Senators, we will now entertain questions on the statements that have been delivered this morning, starting with the first one that was delivered by the Honorable Minister Crystal Caesar, the Minister of Education. Would any senator? Yes, beg your pardon.
Good morning, Madam President. I just wanted to be known that this is my absolute passion. I spent 21 years in international business and now run a charity that does provide scholarships and different services to our students to ensure that they can get to where they need to go. But I have a few questions today. You talk about the different awards and the different amounts. Has there been any considerations? I note they haven't gone up in recent years. Has there been any consideration into looking into increased tuition costs across the different jurisdictions, particularly in the United States. And
Senator Cunningham, you have additional.
I have a supplementary. I have a
supplement.
supplementary to that. Given the new Trump administration, there seems to be a lot of talk on federal funding for international students. So I think my question would be: has the government taken that into account, where students may have historically had large international scholarships that may well be withdrawn, given new legislation coming out of that administration? And a supplementary to that, if I may,
Certainly.
is there the potential for encouraging our students to consider the cheaper jurisdictions of the United Kingdom, given our homeschool fees, and Canadian institutions?
Thank you.
I have another question.
You have a,
I have another question regarding College Promise. So it was mentioned that this is for graduating students from Cedar Bridge Academy and the Berkeley Institute. And I'm fully in favour of anything that encourages our students to further their education. However, I would question the 3.0 GPA. And I feel that, maybe my question is, have the government considered either dropping that GPA requirement so that more students can be involved in further education, or consider means testing, so you take the College Promise and it's just on a means tested basis for anyone with a 2.0 or higher?
thank you, Senator Cunningham. You've had two questions. Sorry,
I have one further question.
one further question.
One further question, and again, no one's going to disagree with providing funding for our students. But I think along with providing that funding, my question is, are there any additional support services offered? So mentoring, internships, and then, the provision of job opportunities upon graduation.
Thank you, Senator Cunningham.
Thank you.
Would any other senator care to present questions?
Yes,
Senator
Madam
Marcus
President.
Jones. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning to you and to my fellow Senate colleagues and to a listening audience. My first question would be, is there an expectation for those scholarship recipients to return to Bermuda and in some form, whether in employment in the public or private sector, to give back to their country as a means of gratification for an extended assistance? That's my one question. And I recognize that the criteria for receiving the scholarship is for one to be a Bermudian. Is there a further requirement for that person that to be resident in Bermuda? In other words, could that Bermudian be resident in the UK, Canada, or anywhere outside of these shores and still be able to qualify to receive scholarships? That's my,
Those are your two questions.
those are my two questions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And
Yes, thank
Yes,
you, Madam
Senator.
President.
Joanna Tannock, sorry.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thanks. My question is regarding the actual application process for the scholarships. As the former chairperson of YouthNet and also on the Knowledge Quest Scholarship Committee and currently still on numerous scholarship committees, what we often find are incomplete applications. And so, if we have the time, we do reach out to candidates or to their parents and try to assist them. But when you have a high volume of applications and limited time, it's difficult to do that. And unfortunately, some students get left behind, not because they are not eligible or because they are not deserving, but simply because they did not have any support to complete the application process. So I'd like to know what support has been put in place for training to get on BermudaScholarships.com, if that's where they're being listed, or to ensure that parents and students both understand the documentation required, how to get transcripts. I know we often leave a lot in the hands of the guidance counselors, but with a high volume of students, it's impossible for them to tutor each one. So when we do get an application, if it is incomplete, what outreach is given, and prior to that, what training is provided would be my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tannock. Would any other senator care to ask questions on this statement? Hearing none, then we will await a response from the minister.
Thank you, Madam President, and I thank my colleagues for clarification on the questions. I'd like to sort of start from the back, or the last few questions, and respond. So as my colleague did indicate, Senator Tannock, with regard to the fact that there are counselors in the schools, the schools do provide a support network for assisting young people to make application for scholarships and awards. In addition, there is a team of people that vet and respond to those who send in their applications, such that if it is incomplete, those applications are vetted, and that there is a response given to individuals as to how they should complete that application. So if one does make application, it is missing, I don't know, a transcript or a reference letter, that is given, they are given a follow-up. As I said, there is a team of people that assist with that. And I believe there was a question with regard to there's always an expectation for our young people to return home, and otherwise, why else would we be giving them education? We expect for our young people to come back and contribute. Now, there are different requirements for different scholarships. There are some that will require specific return on investment, meaning, for instance, if one has a scholarship for teaching, etc., it is anticipated that they will come back and give service, specifically in the Bermuda public school system. Not all scholarships have that requirement, a specific requirement, but overall there is an ethos expecting that our young people will return and give back to Bermuda. But again, this is something that we do as part of our social contract with the community, to ensure that those that want the education have access to it. They may get opportunities, a Bermudian may have an opportunity to, once they've receive their degree, to work in an area overseas. But yes, we would still expect for that person to come back, but there is no specific requirement. And so again, it depends on which scholarship or award we're referring to as to what that requirement would be. In addition, there is the Department of Workforce Development, which, when young people have gotten degrees either through college or through some vocational certification, etc., will assist young people with placement. I think colleagues would be aware that there is we have a youth employment program, which has been very much advocated by my colleague in another place, the Minister of Economy and Labor, in assisting young people in finding work and or training in their areas of interest. So we do have that wraparound support. So it's not just you get your degree and off you go. We do have that support that those that want to contribute do have a mechanism by which they can use through the government to ensure that they are given either internships or some sort of placement assistance. With regard to the college promise, which colleague Senator Cunningham mentioned, we do have to have some level of some bar which we would expect our young people to reach. And I can't say that it has, at this particular time, the 3.0 GPA has not at this particular time been considered to be changed. I agree that I think we may need to consider scope beyond or different maybe GPAs, and maybe relaxation of that slightly, so that more individuals who want to access the Bermuda College through the College Promise would be able to do so. But that can be taken under consideration. And unfortunately, we have no idea what the Trump administration will do as it pertains to our young people studying in the U.S. I will say that we do have our eye on what is happening in the U.S. as it pertains to policies that are changing. Obviously, we're talking about education, but as it pertains to all manner of things. So the government is watching that quite closely, and it is something that we are keeping an eye on, because we certainly wouldn't want our young people who have a level of expectation and or interest in pursuing education overseas in the U.S. to be disadvantaged from doing so. But I think what I did mention in my statement was that we also do have scholarships, not just for students who are considering North America, but obviously we do have the scholarship for anyone who wants to attend in the Caribbean, and we do support young people traveling to the UK as well. So we do consider that, and we do promote that, and we do encourage it as well. I believe that I've answered most questions, Madam President, so I'll leave it there unless there is one that one of the colleagues feels I have not sufficiently answered at this time.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask.
Thank you, Madam President. I do appreciate the Minister of Education informing us and giving some clarification to some of the questions. I would like to request that she be specific in my question in regards to Bermudians that qualify for scholarships, whether there is a need or a requirement that they actually reside on island as opposed to those that are across the four corners of the world.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, that's it.
Marcus Jones, OBA leader in the Senate.
Yes, thank you. I do remember that question now. So Senator Jones and Madam President, most scholarships have an expectation that you have had a certain level of education within Bermuda. And I believe that that requirement is at least 5 years of education locally, right? Within the Bermuda school system, be it private or public education. For whatever reason, parents may choose after which maybe a parent is studying themselves and their children travel with them, but that doesn't preclude them from being able to apply as well. So there is a residency requirement.
Thank you, Minister Crystal Caesar, Minister of Education. And thank you, Senators, for your questions on that statement. We will now move on to the second statement that was given, and that is the upgrade of the CCTV network update, and that was given by Senator Lindsay Simmons. Would any senator care to ask questions? Vice President John White, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have one question, which is, when is the speed camera functionality expected to be completed? So I appreciate the privacy and the other issues involved in its completion, but I think we have to balance those issues with the increasing safety concerns on our roads for our residents and our tourists. And this issue of the speed cameras has been going on for seemingly years now. So I guess I asked so my question is, when do we expect to have that in place? And secondly, in terms of the privacy concerns, surely we must have been aware of these years ago when we announced the initiative of this project, rather than waiting until the 11th hour to have that be a reason for a further delay. So I'm just wondering why that seems to be an issue that came at the 11th hour and wasn't considered previously. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President John White. Would any other senator care to ask a question? Senator Marcus Jones will be a leader in the Senate. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I could not hide my joy and excitement to listen to the junior minister give a progress report on the CCTV purchasing and installation around our island. I think the opposition has been on record many times to sort of see more of an urgency in this take place. So I'm thrilled to see the progress up to 90% of completion, which is great. My question would be, did the actual purchase and installation of this equipment fall within the budget? I believe it was originally put on the budget back in 2023-24. I'd like to know if it actually fell within the budget. And my supplementary to that primary question would be, if not, if there were excess funds needed to complete the project, can we expect that to be in the upcoming budget? And if there's any estimation of how much that would be? I have a second question, Madam President. I took great interest in the statement made within the junior minister's presentation that residents have expressed a greater sense of security with the installation of these cameras. My question would be, were there any concerns from residents on the positioning of these cameras? I asked that question because in my canvassing, actually on Loyal Hill in Devonshire, in an area that Senator Simmons will be very acquainted with, some of the residents there expressed their concern that some of the cameras were positioned where it was going right into their bathroom window and things of that nature. So we heard those concerns. So my question would be, if a resident has found that a camera is positioned in a compromising position, what will be their recourse to be able to advocate for a possible repositioning of the camera, or at least someone that they can talk to see if that can be changed? That is my two questions, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other senator care to ask questions on this statement? Hearing none, then we'll wait for Senator Simmons to obtain responses.
So when it comes to the speed cameras, when is the expected date of completion? Late 2026 or early 2027? For question number 2, the privacy concern at the 11th hour. Privacy has always been a part of the plan. To it's something that the ministry has always had on its forefront to take into consideration, and we just want to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's. Question number 3, did the purchase of the cameras fall in the budget? If not, was it in excessive funds? So we will expect future budgets to exist. And we can expect it to be in the budget coming up. And again, question number 4, concerns. And yes, I'm well aware of the concerns of Loyal Hill. When it comes to recourse, you can always contact the Bermuda Police Service or email the ministry directly with any concerns when it comes to cameras and its placements. So those are the answers to the questions, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons. Hearing no other questions, then we will move on to the next statement.
Thank you.
And that is a statement also by Senator Lindsay Simmons, the National Fire Chiefs Council peer-led review. Does any senator wish to ask questions on this statement? Senator Marcus Jones, OBA leader in the Senate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I did note that the last internal review was conducted in 2010. It is now 2025, so 15 years has passed by since we've had the last one. Is there any plans in place to have more frequent internal reviews when it comes to the fire service, internal reviews with our ever-changing world, with, for example, the strain that's placed on our international airport, the cruise terminal? There are constant changes going on. Bermuda needs to be able to keep at pace to best practices around the world. So my question would be, is there a plan to have more frequent internal reviews in regards to the fire and rescue service? My second question, if I may, Madam President.
Certainly, you acknowledge it.
My second question would be, is there sufficient manpower within the ranks of the fire and rescue service that can adequately cover, like I said just earlier, our cruise terminal in the west, and sufficiently cover our airport, the L.F. Wade Airport, especially in the event if there were simultaneous incidents that happened at the same time? Would the fire service be confident that it can adequately service multiple incidents at one time? And I have a supplementary to that question, Madam President. What in the fire service's opinion, within their internal review, would be the, shall we say, the adequate number of manpower to adequately cover a country of this size with the exposure that we face on a daily basis? And does our manpower fit that number? Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. So the last review was in 2010 to 2025. So we anticipate to have reviews every 5 years. Yes, we can manage incidents. We have the manpower to cover its risk. At the review, we will speak to manpower needs. So that should answer all three questions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons, and all senators who have asked questions on this statement. We will move on to the next ministerial statement, and that is also in the name of Senator Lindsay Simmons in her role as the Junior Minister of National Security. And this statement is the recent youth violence in the community. Would any senator care to ask questions on this statement? Senator Marcus Jones, OBA leader in the Senate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Although it was not pleasant for the junior minister to give this particular chamber a report on the happenings in the Cedar Bridge High School, we do appreciate her giving us this information. My question would be, were there any disciplinary measures placed on those youths, those students that actually were found to be in violation of school policies through this incident? I don't wish for her to give us specifics. I think that's probably asking too much. But I would like to know if there was any disciplinary measures put in place for those that actually violated the rules. And as a supplementary question, Madam President, I'd like to ask an even greater question in light of what transpired. Is there any institutional guidelines within the public school system that will teach our kids how to navigate through social media? We know that social media can be a dangerous place, and we definitely want our kids fortified and fully informed of the pitfalls and the risks of danger that they may encounter. I will say this as a sidebar. I have a friend is a principal in Cleveland, Ohio, whose school board has instituted a very instructive and intensive guidelines for all of their students within their area, that teaches them and gives them guidelines on how to navigate through social media. And I don't think that's a bad thing for us in Bermuda to adopt, so that we can furnish and provide a defense for our children when they wade into the waters of social media. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Cunningham, I believe you have a question. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. So along with providing youth scholarships and mentoring, Cedar Bridge is another place that's very close to my heart. And I was very saddened to hear the news. In light of, and I don't know if members in this chamber or members of the listening order have watched the British Netflix show Adolescence, but it is quite eye-opening with a 13-year-old young boy. And articles and everything that have come out have stated that a lot of these aggressions and things come out of primary school and not high school. So I think one of my first questions is going to be, do we have a youth strategy, but does it start at the necessary age level, which seemingly is below 8? And then my second question, you mentioned quite rightly, and I think government cannot solve this problem entirely, and we do need the community to help us. So for those in the listening audience, I urge you to come forward. But my honourable colleague Marcus Jones just mentioned about the what happened to the students involved. You mentioned something about parents needing to take accountability and be responsible. How do you see that manifesting itself? How can we hold the parents responsible? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cunningham. Would any other senator care to ask questions on this statement? Hearing none, then we'll wait to hear from Senator Lindsay Simmons. Response.
One second, Madam President. Madam President, we have a code of conduct that we must follow, and so we have followed the code of conduct in relation to these incidents or any incidents that happen within the school system. So we do follow the code of conduct, which is out in the public domain. When it comes to social media, Madam President, we do have, from primary school levels, teachers and social workers and counselors that come in that do speak to students about social media and how to use social media and how to monitor social media. But again, it's a collaborative effort. We need parents and adults and everybody to monitor their children. Obviously, teachers can't be monitoring children's phones, but we ask parents to monitor what your children do on social media. So yes, we do get into these schools and talk about social media and how to use social media. And when it comes to parent involvement, our goal is to hopefully have parents be more involved and addressing the needs of our students. And if you see that it is issues at home, contact the schools and let the schools know that you are having a problem, because that factors into your school system as well. And if we know early, then we can put in measures to try to protect our students. And I think that answered all our questions, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons. Oh, Madam AG, Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Madam
Wilkins-
President.
Wilkerson.
Yes, if I might, just to supplement Minister Simmons's response, certainly to the last question that was asked by Senator Cunningham around, I think the question was more about enforcing parental responsibility and what is a framework for that. There is on the books a piece of legislation called the Parental Responsibility Act. It was tabled back in 2010. I think, and the effort with that was to create a framework for establishing those guidelines for social responsibility. My colleagues, certainly cabinet colleagues, have asked that we relook at that. And I think one of the concerns around how to legislate that means that you have to have the resources in place for parental counseling and the support systems. And we acknowledge that all of those are not in place at the moment to make that effective. So you will have heard in the throne speech the phased approach to amendments of the Young Offenders Act and the review of the Children Act. So I think these have to be looked at more holistically, so there is a framework in place. I think it would not be at its optimal functioning if we don't have the support systems, which is what is critical, in place to support parents. So more news to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly, Minister Wilkerson, Minister of Justice, and AG. Thank you for providing additional information. Senators, having dealt with that question, we will now move on to the final question that or statement, I should say, that was given this morning, and that was the statement on dementia care services, the pilot program, and that was given by Senator Fubler this morning. Would any senator care to ask questions? Vice President John White, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have one question. I'm just curious, the work conducted by this group, including the pilot program, does this work align or differ from the work that is conducted by the nonprofit organization Dementia Bermuda? That's my question. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator White. Would any other senator care to ask questions on this statement? Senator Cunningham, you have the floor.
Thank you. My question's more around the funding. So is it anticipated that our insurance providers will be required to cover more of these dementia-related services, or is there a plan to introduce more public funding or subsidies to make these services more accessible for our seniors and dementia care sufferers?
Was that your only question, Senator? Yes, thank you. Senator Tannock, I believe you have indicated you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, Madam President. I noted that there was a mention of having a daycare facility for seniors with dementia, and I wanted to know where that stood currently. If you mentioned where we are with that initiative, I missed it. My apologies.
For the listening audience, just conferring with the technical officers to supply responses.
Thank you for that, Senator Fubler, and we will await your response when you're ready.
Okay, we've got some of the responses coming in to Senator White's question around the charity Dementia Bermuda's involvement in the pilot program. The clinical director of Dementia Bermuda is also the head of North Star Dementia, and they, as a result, work closely together. To Senator Cunningham's question around funding and whether it's anticipated that insurers or public funding will meet the gap required for servicing those with dementia. That's really part of the kind of larger discussion around long-term care financing and universal health care, so to be determined. And to Senator Tannock, the daycare facility is currently in the design stage, and I believe in the statement we mentioned that the site visit was conducted in February. Hopefully that answers all of your questions. I'll take any supplementals if there are.
Senators or who've asked questions, do you have any supplemental? Senator Tannock?
Yeah, I do. And so when we look at the daycare and the training that's necessary, do we have any programs to train already qualified healthcare professionals to deal specifically with dementia patients? Are we looking at running any training or providing any resources for that?
Okay, I've got a response here for Senator Tannock. There is training available at Bermuda College, as well as additional training held by local organizations and professional development. And, it's an area of focus identified as part of the integrated care pathway underway for dementia. So it's looking like there are some resources available, and we are looking to expand those.
Thank you, Senator Fabler, for your response. And thank you all senators for the questions you have put on all these statements that were given this morning. We will continue now to move on to our agenda. That is the second reading of the orders of the day, of course. And the orders of the day include those that may be considered under provisions of Standing Order 25 or suspension of Standing Order 71. And we have three bills: the second reading of the Corporate Income Tax Penalty Provisions Amendment Act, second reading of the Municipalities Amendment Act 2025, and the second reading of the Employment Amendment Act 2025. I believe Minister Caesar was going to present.
Yes, Madam President. May it be considered under provisions of Standing Order 25 that the following bills, and I'll read them all by name.
Thank you.
The Corporate Income Tax Penalty Provisions Amendment Act 2025, the Municipalities Amendment Act 2025, and the Employment Amendment Act 2025 be now read for the second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill, the Corporate Income Tax Penalty Provisions Amendment Act 2025, be read for the second time. Madam President, it is my distinct honor and privilege on behalf of the government to rise this morning in this honorable House to debate the bill entitled Corporate Income Tax Penalty Provisions Amendment Act 2025. Madam President, this bill seeks to amend the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023, or the CIT Act, to introduce civil and criminal penalties, enhance enforcement and compliance mechanisms, and clearly outline penalties for failing to meet regulations and filing deadlines. It also establishes penalties for non-payment of taxes when due, and for inaccuracies in tax return declarations. Madam President, this reaffirms Bermuda's longstanding commitment to be a cooperative, compliant, and transparent jurisdiction with respect to international tax matters. Madam President, the CIT Act and/or any other relevant legal provisions do not currently provide for penalty provisions. By way of background, I would like to note that in December 2023, the Bermuda government enacted the Corporate Income Tax the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023, which imposes a statutory tax rate of 15% on the profits of Bermuda entities which are part of multinational enterprises, or M&E groups, with more than 750 million euros in total global revenues in at least 2 of the previous 4 fiscal years. It is estimated that the introduction of the CIT would impact approximately 2,000 companies registered in Bermuda. This was in response to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, in collaboration with the group of 20 industrialized countries, the G20, working to address the issue of base erosion and profit sharing, or BEPS. BEPS refers to tax planning strategies used by multinational enterprises to exploit gaps and mismatches in tax rules, allowing them to artificially shift profits to low or no tax jurisdictions where they have little or no economic activity. By implementing this tax, Bermuda avoids being labeled a non-cooperative jurisdiction or tax haven, which could lead to international sanctions or reputational harm. Madam President, the government then enacted the Corporate Income Tax Agency Act 2024 that established a corporate body to be known as the Corporate Income Tax Agency to administer the corporate income tax regime under the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023. Madam President, following the decision to implement a corporate income tax, the Bermuda government moved quickly to progress the necessary legislation. Due to the complexity and technical nature of international tax matters, it was expected that refinements and additional legislation would be required to develop comprehensive enforcement and compliance mechanisms aligned with international best practices. Madam President, the Ministry of Finance held a public consultation on penalty provisions from January to February 2025, which included an illustrative bill. The overall penalty framework is largely modeled after the U.S. Internal Revenue Code system as it is familiar to most taxpayers. Additionally, the framework is designed to align with procedures for default fines and civil penalties under Bermuda's laws while ensuring the right to a fair hearing, as mandated by Section 6(8) of the Bermuda's Constitution Order 1968. Madam President, the feedback gathered during the consultation process was carefully considered, and as deemed appropriate, amendments were made to the legislation. Key changes involve provisions that enable written representations to be made by the taxpayer before a final penalty decision is made, to enhance the adjudication process. Further, the criminal liability for individuals has, as a result of consultation, been narrowed so the standard is now higher than negligence. An individual must be found to have practiced consent or contrivance in order to face coextensive criminal liability with the corporation. These adjustments demonstrate that the government's commitment to engaging with stakeholders and ensuring that legislation is clear, effective, and in line with international best practices. While the core provisions of the bill remain unchanged, these refinements address concerns raised during the consultation process, enhance clarity, and improve the overall execution of the framework. The penalty levels have been reviewed by the ministry's tax advisors, and it has been determined that it would be prudent of Bermuda to maintain the levels proposed, given the size and significance of the taxpayers involved, as they allow the required level of flexibility to the agency, while ensuring that Bermuda can demonstrate that our regime can appropriately enforce compliance. The government remains committed to its ongoing program of consulting with all relevant stakeholders to ensure the framework supports both compliance and economic growth in the jurisdiction. Madam President, the penalty provisions that are being proposed include both civil and criminal penalties. The following outlines the civil penalties. 1, failure to register. 2, failure to file. 3, failure to accurately state tax on a return. And 4, failure to pay tax when due. The following outlines the key criminal penalties. 1, personal liability. 2, deliberate failure to file return. And 3, tax evasion. Madam President, this act also amends the Corporate Income Tax Agency Act 2024 to revise the definition of tax receipts to clarify that any penalties imposed by the agency shall not become the property of the agency. Madam President, in addition to these penalty provisions, a separate and distinct interest regime for tax underpayments will be established through future regulations in due course. These regulations will address registration and general administration, payment of taxes, including paying tax due, the manner of the payment, installment payments, underpayments, and overpayments, returns and inquiries, assessments, clearance, and disputes. Madam President, in closing, I would like to note that the government firmly believes that the corporate income tax framework strengthens Bermuda's ongoing commitment to global compliance and transparency, while upholding the island's strong international reputation. The progress we have achieved today would not have been possible without the invaluable contributions of the International Tax Working Group, whose expertise and dedication to continue to play a vital role in this important work. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone in the Ministry of Finance, including our committed advisors who have devoted their time, energy, and expertise to this effort. Their work has been further supported by the drafting team at the Attorney General's chambers, to whom I also express my sincere appreciation. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Senator the Honorable Crystal Caesar, the spokesperson for Finance. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Yes, Senator.
Madam
Marcus
President,
Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm a bit slow here. Senator Marcus Jones, OBA leader in the Senate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to express my appreciation for the brief that the Minister of Education, in her role as spokesman for finance here in the Senate chambers, we here in the opposition are in full support of this amendment. One can possibly deem some of the stipulations in this amendment as being onerous and sort of extremely high, but I think it's important that it be that way because we do want to get a grip on those potential companies that may want to look for loopholes or look to skirt the system. I think it's important that we as the jurisdiction make a strong statement that we are committed to ensuring that if any company wants to be here, function here, operate here, that we have regulations in place that ensures that the taxes are going to be received in a timely manner, received accurately, and deter anyone or any company from wanting to stray from these rules and from these policies. I will say that one concern that I would have is I am concerned that there will be ample enforcement of those that run awry from the stated policies. I would want to know and have some comfort that there is sufficient tax professionals that have the expertise to be able to ensure that there's no funny business going on. So I am concerned about the enforcement aspect of it. Another question that I want to raise that it has been sort of bandied about around the community is the minister did mention that that this particular amendment and in a wider scale this particular corporate income tax legislation will impact many. I think she was saying a few thousand international businesses in this country. My question to her would be, what is the estimated number of companies in this country that will actually be paying taxes under this particular legislation? I've heard a number as high as over 100 or so. I've heard somewhere between 30 and just 30 or 40 companies. I think the country would like some indication of how many, what's the number that the government is looking at international companies that will actually be paying taxes under this legislation. That will be helpful. But as I said from the onset, we here in the opposition, we give our full support to this amendment. I believe the penalties for running afoul of the legislation, I think they are reasonable. I believe that they're punitive enough to deter those that would want to run afoul of the law and the regulations to not go that in that path. And Madam President, with those words, I submit.
Thank you, Senator Jones. I think Senator Tawana Tannock, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. With the implementation of civil and criminal penalties, what I guess we could call the stick, I hesitate to say the word carrot, but if we look at balancing it, I know that the government mentioned that they would be looking at providing information about QRTCs, qualified tax credits, although that doesn't make sense, qualified return tax credits, I believe. But where are we with that? That was going to be in 2024. So now we've issued these, or we are about to talk about penalties without talking about any type of incentives for companies who do and are honorable in remitting taxes. So that's my question with regard to that. And then I had a second question with regard to the actual legislation itself and section, let's see. The section that states on page 5 in this section, so that would be section 46E. 5B, decisions of the court. And court is capitalized. And I know that court is not defined in the Parent Act. And of course, court in the Interpretation Act just says something like not a coroner's court or something else. It just excludes two types of courts. So when we talk about court, we're talking about a decision of the Supreme Court of Bermuda. Can we just get clarity on whether or not we're going to actually specify court, since it's not defined in this act or the Parent Act? And like I said, in the Interpretation Act, it actually just states what courts are not defined under the term court. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tannock. Vice President John White, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. For starters, I'd like to say that I think Bermuda has created a very effective new tax regime in respect of CIT. I'm very supportive of this bill. While we would expect every constituent entity and scope to make good on their obligations to government, both in respect of filing and when necessary paying, the reality is that there must be some deterrent and penalty for those who choose not to. So I think the bills regarding the civil and criminal penalties are appropriate, and I fully support. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Vice President White. Would any other senator care to ask questions on this bill? And senators, I would just like to acknowledge in the chamber the presence of Genesis Iris from the Ministry of Finance, as well as Gwen Johnson, the Parliamentary Counsel. Welcome to both of you this morning. And they will be assisting in the answering of the questions that have been posed by you all.
Okay, Madam President, I do have answers, specifically around to Senator Jones with regard to the enforcement and do we have the level of expertise. We do actually, we have, the agency is hiring and will be hiring particular tax individuals who have a level of expertise that will be able to provide the level of experience to monitor and or I guess enforce, as Senator Jones put the question, to be able to bring this regime into effect. So we're in the process. We do have experts who are assisting us with obviously developing the regime, and more people will be brought on as required. There was a question with regard to the number of companies. Well, my statement did actually, or my brief did actually talk about the fact that there were an estimated 2,000 companies that will be impacted. And obviously we can't predict what one has made or will make. So we would wait for time to see who actually will be paying in, but there's about 2,000 companies who will be impacted by the CIT regime. And to Senator Tannock's question with regard to qualified tax credits, if you just give me 2 seconds. So with regard to the qualified tax credits that Senator Tannock asked about, the Tax Reform Commission is actively working to provide recommendations to reduce cost of living and doing business in Bermuda. And so the government is actually anticipating that in June of this year, we will be able to collate those recommendations, and with the view thereafter of providing legislation that will incorporate any qualifying tax credits. So that's still in process. So watch this space. And then with regard to the question on which specific court, if Senator Tannock would note that in Section 48, it specifically mentions that there is an appeal to Supreme Court. So it is actually the Supreme Court that would be handling these types of matters. And I believe that answers everyone's questions. And I appreciate the support from all senators. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister Crystal Caesar, Minister of Education, but spokesperson on finance in the Senate. And thank you, senators, for your questions. We will now move on to item number 2 on our orders of the day, and that, sorry, oh, I beg your pardon. Of course. I don't know why I'm in a hurry this morning. I'm
Yes, I
functioning
have to
too
read
well.
again, yes.
Please excuse me this morning.
No worries. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Penalty Provisions Amendment Act 2025 be read for a second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the Rule 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Penalty Provisions Amendment Act 2025 be now read a third time.
Is there any objection to the third reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
Is there any objection to the passage of the bill? No objection, the bill is passed. Thank you, Minister Caesar, and thank you all senators for your participation and questions. We'll now move on to the second item on our orders of the day, and that is the second reading of the Municipalities Amendment Act 2025, and that will be presented by Senator Lauren Bell, the Junior Minister for Housing and Municipalities. Senator Bell, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam President. Thank you. I now move that the bill entitled Municipalities Amendment Act 2025 be read for the second time.
Is there any objection to the second reading? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Madam President, Senate colleagues, as well as the listening audience. I rise to present the bill entitled Municipalities Amendment Act 2025. This bill seeks to amend the Municipalities Act 1923 to provide for the next ordinary municipal elections for the mayor and councilors of the corporations of Hamilton and St. George's to be held in 2026. Madam President, the Corporation of Hamilton initiated constitutional proceedings in 2019 challenging the government's Municipalities Reform Bill. While the Supreme Court of Bermuda and subsequently the Bermuda Court of Appeal ruled in favor of the government, this matter is currently before the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, with a decision pending following a hearing held in December 2024. Madam President, in light of this, the government deems it both necessary and responsible to postpone the scheduled 2025 municipal elections by 1 calendar year to May 2026. This will ensure that the final outcome of the appeal process can be fully considered prior to proceeding with any electoral or structural changes to Bermuda's municipal governance. While the legal proceedings may not directly impact the mechanics of municipal elections, the outcome could have significant implications for the governance and the structure of corporations. Proceeding with elections at this time could potentially result in unnecessary confusion, possible legal challenges, or a need to dismantle the newly elected administrators if the Privy Council's decision leads to changes in the existing municipal framework. It is therefore prudent to await the Privy Council's decision before holding elections. Madam President, it is also important to highlight that the timing of the Privy Council's decision is entirely outside the government's control. Although the matter was heard in December 2024, the judicial process is independent, and the delivery of ruling remains in the discretion of the court. As such, postponing the election is a prudent safeguard, ensuring that any future municipal actions are made with full legal clarity. Madam President, I give assurances that both the corporations of Hamilton and St. George were consulted in advance of the proposed legislative amendment. Both have acknowledged the government's position, and neither has objected to the postponement. And Madam President, with your permission, I would like to quote from Royal Gazette, March 24th, 2025.
Certainly you may.
Thank you, Madam President. In fact, the Mayor of Hamilton has publicly recognized the consultation as a fundamental step towards fostering a collaborative and positive relationship. The Bermuda government has taken steps to ensure that no additional operational cost will be incurred by deferring the election. After discussion with both corporations, it was confirmed that postponement will not result in extra financial burdens for either government or the municipal bodies. Furthermore, while the Parliamentary Register remains prepared to carry out elections if required, election preparations have been paused to avoid the inefficient use of public resources during a period of legal uncertainty. Madam President, in the event that vacancies arise during the extended term, the Municipalities Act 1923 provide for extraordinary municipal elections. This ensures that any individual posts that become vacant can be filled promptly and democratically, preserving the continuity of governance and representation. Madam President, for clarity, this is not an erosion of democracy, but a responsible pause to ensure elections occur under a clear and stable legal framework. It is a responsible step taken to avoid holding elections in the midst of legal uncertainty. Elections are a vital part of a democratic system, and postponement in this context ensures that any future elections take place under stable and legally sound conditions. The government remains committed to upholding democratic principles, maintaining the integrity of Bermuda's democratic institutions, acting transparently, and prioritizing long-term stability and good governance for the residents and businesses that fall under the remit of our municipalities. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lauren Bell. Would any senator care to speak on this amendment? Senator Marcus Jones, OBA leader in the Senate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Would just like to thank the junior minister for giving this brief on this Municipalities Amendment Act of 2025. I could not help but take note of the junior minister's usage of the word democracy on several occasions in her presentation, which really has spurred me to look a little bit deeper at that word democracy before I give my contributions to this particular debate. When we look at the word democracy, Madam President, democracy is a government whose supreme power is vested in the people, and they exercise these powers either directly or indirectly through a system of representation which under normal circumstances involves periodically held free elections. Madam President, that is my simple layman's understanding of what democracy is all about. But when I look at the history of, in particular, the Corporation of Hamilton and the Corporation of St. George's, we know the history. The history, it has been, both these corporations from its inception had been an old boys club where the power in these two corporations was held in the hands of very few persons that had power and control over a large number of persons and businesses. And it never ceases to amaze me how this PLP government's pursuit of control and power exceeds its pursuit of democracy. For a people group who once were disadvantaged and were not a part of the electoral process to now, over the last, I guess it's been the last 6 years since this amendment was first put to this chamber, Madam President, for them to watch them in real time dismantle all the framework of democracy in these two corporations, which once disadvantaged a certain people group in this country, is astounding, Madam President. I will remind you, and in fact, the listening audience, to back in March of 2019, when we wrestled as a Senate this particular amendment that the government brought first to the House, that was accepted by the House, and then was voted down by this chamber, Madam President. I also note that the Minister of Education, she was also, Minister Caesar was also a part of those deliberations back in March of 2019. So it really amazes me that once upon a time we fought and marched and protested for universal adult suffrage, and now we're looking at, here we are in 2025, when we are going fast, speeding fast towards taking away brick by brick democracy as we know it. Madam President, I found it necessary to actually go into the website of the Corporation of Hamilton, for example, and if you may allow me to actually read their vision and their mission statement, because I think it's applicable to addressing this particular amendment. Madam President, the vision of the Corporation of Hamilton that was instituted in May of 2019 says, "We will be a democratically elected, vibrant, safe, and clean city focused on economic growth and livability." Madam President, their core values are accountable, collaborative, excellence, innovative, integrity, reliable, transparent, and inclusivity. Madam President, those are very, very noble aspirations for the Corporation of Hamilton, and no doubt similar aspirations can be found within the vision and mission of the Corporation of St. George. But Madam President, if we were to go back to March of 2019, there was a number of principles that we grappled with, even back then. One of them was the fact that even at that time, the mayor of St. George's had conducted a poll back in 2019, and 94% of those ratepayers of the residents and business owners of St. George's, 94% were against there being a change in the legislation at that time. Back then, the OBA was strongly against these amendments to the Municipality Act, and nothing much has changed since then. Back then, it was seen as a hostile takeover by the government, which still is in power today, and nothing has changed. Back then, the legislation allowed for a minister to have oversight on the operations and the decision-making of both corporations. That has not changed. Madam President, as we fast forward to here we are in 2025, we're looking at there being a delay in the voting and the election of its officers. I go back to the terminology and the definition used for democracy, and one of the important pillars of democracy is that there be free elections and that they be held periodically. And there is a certain comfort and assurance when those that are actually voting for these officials and those that are actually putting their hands up to put forward their services to serve these corporations, they come into it with an idea of the terms, and one of which is the time and the years that they will actually be spending in service as an officer of the corporations. So when we look at the present government looking to delay those elections, it is just another real, if not symbolic, move by this government to tell the public that we are not in favor of full democracy within within these two corporations, Madam President. And because nothing has changed since that time, as far as our stance as the opposition, we are in objection of this particular amendment. And as I was meditating on this terminology of democracy and how we're seeing it being eroded in our society today, I cannot forget, Madam President, the story of the rabbi that was born over 2,000 years ago, that walks the hills of Galilee and Judea, who turned to his followers and said to them, "You are the salt of the earth." Madam President, we hear that phrase used often, but when you study and look at it, I believe it's applicable for even what's happening in our political arena today. Back in March of 2019, as we debated and discussed and deliberated this particular amendment, and as we, on this side of the aisle, put up the red flag for our community to give some warnings that our democracy is being taken advantage of, we're reminded of how salt has a preservative attribute about it, in that it is able to preserve food, meat specifically, from being spoiled. Another characteristic of salt is that it slows down the acceleration of decay and deterioration. And so when I look back on the last 6 years, how that decision that was made in the Senate to actually slow down the dismantling of democracy within the realm of the Corporation of Hamilton and St. George's, I can see that we as a political group were able to add salt to this process by slowing down the dismantling of democracy. So much so that we've had 6 years where both corporations have been able to have free elections. No doubt, we all know that over the last 6 years, there's been 1 or 2 times that those elections were not able to be held at the time that was originally prescribed to be held. But Madam President, over the last 6 years, these corporations have been able to function and operate entirely under the umbrella of democracy in action. But we know the inevitability of what's going on here, and we do appreciate that the government was able to go and consult with both mayors of both corporations, and we see that they were not an objection to it. But Madam President, I sincerely believe that these mayors and their councilors and aldermen, they're tired, they're weary, they're tired of the fight and the battle for democracy, for being able to have things the way where its citizens and businesses are able to vote for their direct representatives. So much so, Madam President, I'm not surprised that they capitulated and said, well, let it be the way you want it to be. But Madam President, I can safely and confidently stand and here and say that the One Bermuda Alliance, as the loyal opposition in these islands, are here with our purpose of demanding and defending democracy as far as we can take it. And we will continue to stand very strongly and advocate for every area in this country that has democracy under attack. We will stand and we will make a sound and loud defense in favor of democracy. So, Madam President, with those short words, I will say that we as the opposition object to this amendment, and we thank you for the time given me. Thank you. Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Marcus Jones, OBA leader in the Senate. And before I open the floor to other senators to speak, I would just like to acknowledge, welcome, and recognize Mr. Drew Pettit, the Permanent Secretary for Housing and Municipalities, who's in the chamber. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Vice President John White, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I think this issue can be argued either way, and my view is I'm not opposed to it. I think if collaboration did take place, I took note of the Charles Gosling's comments in the paper, and he certainly was supportive of the engagement that we always look for when in advance of bills being brought forward to the House and to the Senate. So I just think there's so many more important issues that we're dealing with in Bermuda at the moment that this one, to me, is sort of sixth one, half dozen the other. So I'm not going to oppose it. I will support it. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President. Would any other senator care to speak? Senator Tannock, you have the floor.
Yep, thank you, Madam President. I get really nervous anytime we talk about suspending elections. I don't think it sets a good precedent. I really admire anybody who serves, whether it be on either house and in the Corporation of Hamilton and Corporation of St. George's. However, what I will say is that it isn't unusual for elected officials to agree to suspend elections. So I wouldn't take that endorsement to say that this is the right thing to do. And I can tell you that I am not and will not be in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tannock. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Minister Wilkerson, AG, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And to members of the listening audience, I thought it was interesting to hear Senator Jones's dissertation and history lesson on democracy after his, in his own words, admission, meditation on the topic. Madam President, this is a practical issue. In the event that these elections were to go ahead this year, and then there was a decision of the Privy Council that could potentially undo things that were determined, there would be a hue and cry about the government's waste of resources. This measure is being responsible, and while I've heard my colleague, Senator Tannock, say she's opposed because it is a suspension, it is a delay by 1 year. That is the ask here. This is not an effort to undo democracy. It is merely to delay it. And those who are opposed seem to have conveniently overshadowed, I think, the purpose of the delay in this case. Members of the public will know that this has been a drawn-out legal battle where it has been the corporation who has continued to appeal the decisions. It wasn't the government of Bermuda who simply said, fine, we're going to simply delay open-endedly and move the ability for there to be democratic elections in the city of Hamilton. That was not the case. The matter was, as we know, and I will reiterate it, the Supreme Court of Bermuda ruled in favor of the government, as articulated in the judgment, the Corporation of Hamilton versus the Attorney General and the Governor of Bermuda in 2019. The Corporation of Hamilton then appealed that decision in the Bermuda Court of Appeal in November 2021. The Court of Appeal again ruled in favor of the government, as articulated in the judgment, the Corporation of Hamilton versus the Attorney General and the Governor of Bermuda in 2022. It was the Corporation of Hamilton that then appealed to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in December of 2024. Now, the point at which we are at right now is that the respective parties are currently awaiting the decision. Madam President, the opposition Senate leader opposite seemed to suggest some attribution to the agreement of the mayors to their collaborative stance on this. I found that befuddling, actually, because he could bring no evidence of what their motivation might have been for agreeing to the collaboration. But the fact is that they have collaborated, they have been consulted, and like practical people, they are probably saying it's just a practical matter to agree to this delay so that things can be done properly and in order once that Privy Council decision is rendered. And that is what the ask is. This is a matter of practicality, Madam President, and I hope that the people of Bermuda will see that it is that and not any other thing that is a kind of brick by brick demolition of democracy. That certainly is not the case, Madam President. Those are my comments, and I believe that members of the listening public will certainly be in favor of measures by this government that are practical and that support not a waste of resources. Again, I would just summarize by saying this is not saying there will be no democracy. It is this piece of legislation is saying it should wait just 12 months and 25 becomes 26 in order that the decision from the Privy Council can be obtained. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Justice and Attorney General, Minister Kim Wilkerson. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Hearing none, and it's back to you, Senator Laurendale.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, colleagues, for your input. I just want to first acknowledge Senator Jones. I appreciate your recognition of Bermuda's history and what many recognize the uncomfortable history surrounding the municipalities. So I appreciate the recognition of Bermuda's checkered past. I want to reiterate that the government's position on this is that proceeding with elections under uncertainty could disrupt the continuity and the governance if legal rulings calls for structural changes. Holding elections while awaiting a potentially transformative ruling could lead to confusion and requiring reversing electoral outcomes. The government believes it's more prudent to wait for the court's final decision before proceeding with a vote that could be rendered moot or misaligned with the restructured governance framework. This government does not view this as an erosion of democracy, and as my colleague has highlighted, this is a practical matter. This is a responsible step taken to avoid holding elections in the midst of legal uncertainty. Elections are a vital part of our democratic system, and postponement in this context ensures that any future elections take place under stable and legally sound conditions. It is important to note that consultation was had with both municipalities and both are in full agreement for this postponement. And for those of you who are familiar with the Municipalities Act, it wasn't that long ago municipalities elections were held every 3 years. It wasn't until recently it was moved to 2. It is important to recognize that the Act does allow for extraordinary municipal elections if needed. So if one of the members of either of the corporations needed to step away, the Act does ensure that a postponement period can be filled promptly, preserving democratic presentations and operational continuity. With that, Madam President, I now ask for consideration for the bill entitled Municipalities Amendment Act 2025 be now read in a second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill entitled Municipalities Amendment Act 2025 be now read in a third time.
Which got to do Rule 26.
I apologize.
26.
I apologize. Madam President, I move that Rule 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill entitled Municipalities Amendment Act 2025 be now read a third time.
Is there any objection to the third reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
Is there any objection to the passage of the bill? I will ask the clerk then to, since there are do we have a seconder? And third, so the 3 and 4. There are 4 objections. All 3 will be senators as well as Senator Tannick. Senators, as there are 4 objections, or there are objections, more than 3, so we will have a vote. So the clerk will call out the names and you will respond.
It has been moved that the Municipalities Amendment Act 2025 be passed. If you are in agreement with the passage of the bill, say aye. If you are opposed to the passage, say nay. Senator Cunningham. Senator Foley.
Nay.
Senator Jones.
Nay.
Senator Bell.
Yay.
Minister Caesar.
Yay.
Senator Fubler.
Aye.
Senator Simmons.
Yay.
Minister Wilkerson.
Yay.
Senator Tannick.
Nay.
Senator White.
Aye.
Madam President.
Aye.
With a vote of 7 to 4, the bill passes.
Thank you, Senators. The bill has been passed with a 7 to 4 vote, and therefore, Senator, you will now do the final reading of the bill.
Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill do now pass, and thank you, Senator. The bill is passed. I will just read it out. The second reading of the Municipalities Amendment Act 2025 is now passed. Thank you, Senators, for your contributions. We will now move on now to item number 3 on our orders of the day. Oh, I beg your pardon. I've just been reminded of the time. Senators, it's now 25 past 12. We do have more business to do, so I am suggesting, Madam AG, that the Senate do break for lunch. Would you please move us to lunch?
Yeah, I move that Senate now adjourn for lunch. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. So we'll move for lunch and we will return at 2 o'clock. Senate stands adjourned.